Well, we're really pleased to have Jeff Jarvis here to share about the mills and the Cannon River Valley. I've been trying to learn as much as I can about it since it started at the Historical Society in 2007. And I ran across print ads for a book, and which is when I first saw Jeff's name. And was really excited when I got to meet him this summer when we did our story, oral history, with Art McKinley, who's in his, what is he, 95 or early 90s? And 96, and was a mill worker here in Cannon Falls. So he shared some of this history, and Jeff has kindly agreed to come and share some of his slides and presentations, and also at the end there, highlight a little bit of the Cannon Falls stuff and some of the collections that we have in our museum. So let's welcome
You're blowing
Jeff.
bubbles, Zach.
Huh?
You're blowing bubbles.
Oh. Okay, let's welcome Jeff up.
Hello, everybody. Nice crowd we have here tonight, and I suspect you might learn a little bit of something tonight. I'm not quite certain about that, but it's awfully humbling coming here and talking to a bunch of people interested in local history when I'm not from here. So I'll try to be as factual as I can and try not to blow stuff by that I don't know anything about. So I guess I should start off by saying this is not my first time in Cannon Falls. My first visit here lasted 28 days. I never went home. And I was, anybody ever heard of Mineral Springs? Yeah. Well, that's why I always love coming back to Cannon Falls, because when I went there when I was age 19, it totally turned my life around. So coming back here is one of the most wonderful places for me on earth. And I'm just kind of repaying a debt. You know, we're all living on borrowed time, and I feel very, very fortunate to have fallen into this history stuff, because that's basically what happened. I didn't pick it, it chose me. And for you that know history, you learn a little bit, and you gotta learn a lot more, because it's like an itch that can't be scratched. Okay. Last year, or 2 years ago, I did a program at the winery in town here. That's a place that has another beautiful mural on it. And well, being a non-drinker, I've been in recovery since I've been age 19. I didn't know how it was going to go, but I knew. Excuse me.
Speak up.
Oh.
Maybe
Well,
they're coming over.
I've been accused of being a mumbler, so it's okay to ask for what you need. So anyway, I go to the winery. I'm doing this, starting to do this program for people that haven't had a thing to eat all day, and here they are drinking wine. It's a wine tasting event. And I've never been to a wine tasting event in my life. And I told them so before I got into all my slides about milling. I said, you know, I drank a little wine in my day, but you know, sometimes we didn't even take the bag off the bottle. And they didn't find it very funny. So anyway, just kind of a cute story. So for the last 8 years, I've been working on this book. It started out as an art project. I'm a visual artist. I like drawing and illustrating. So I had all these really cool drawings of the old mills. I was born in Faribault between two mills on the Cannon River. And just fascinated with them for some reason. Anyway, so I started doing all these drawings, and in the process of looking for decent reference photos, I ran into this old eye doctor in Faribault that wrote a book about the Straight River. And he said, well, you ought to write a book to go along with all these great pictures you've drawn. And so that's what started me out on this journey of researching all the mills along the Cannon River. And it stretches from Waterville, that's about as far west as it goes, and then up to Red Wing and down to Milling Purifier. It's like 5 or 6 counties. So it takes in the whole watershed. So anyway, it's been an 8-year run so far, and I've got about 300 pages, and now I'm starting to take stuff out, you know, editing. So anyway, it's nice to see everybody here. We might as well get started. Zach is my remote, so if I do this, that means advance. So anyway, I got a website, and this is one of my most favorite spots in southern Minnesota. That's the Oxford Mill, just west of town here. And if you've never seen it, go down there. It's wonderful. The first time I looked in that building, it was just like a cathedral. You know, it had a presence. And for those of you that understand history and everything that it entails, when you come upon a historic spot, it's pretty special. And so it's pretty easy to go back there. Done about 8 or 9 pilgrimages down there, because that's just kind of a sacred thing to me. I call it a pilgrimage. So anyway, I got this fancy website and everything. It doesn't mean much. This is actually propaganda. I got to put in a shameless, you know, insert here. So go ahead, Zach. The watershed takes in like 5 or 6 Minnesota counties. I'm kind of writing stories about all these and some of the mills and the people that are associated with the mills and whatnot. And there's a lot of really cool human interest stories, you know, that go along with the upbuilding of each mill town. I hope you guys find it half as interesting as I found it. So, the focus of my research has been the heydays of milling in the Cannon Valley, which takes in about 15 years, 15, maybe 20 years, starting in about 1860. There was a lot of pretty important things that happened here. So, go ahead. History doesn't happen in a vacuum. I mean, there's certain reason things happened the way they did. There was a lot of really important innovations in milling that happened here, and it was for a reason. There was a lot of factors involved that helped make it happen. We had fast running water. Here in town you have Little Cannon River, the Big Cannon. You've got the Zumbro nearby, the Straight River, you know, and all the creeks besides. Those all provided the energy that the first grist mills needed to grind flour. We had the rich soil. You know, it grew the wheat that fueled the mills. We had the big woods and the quarries to provide building material. The quarries also, you know, provided lime, you know, to cement the stone together for foundations and wells, and in some cases the entire mill was built out of stone. And the other thing that was kind of the glue in making all this good stuff happen here was the ingenuity of the people that came here. A lot of the people came from out east. Some came from other countries. You know, some came from Canada, some from England. But the ones that settled here brought a lot of knowledge with them and ingenuity. And they were innovators. And the next couple slides talk about a couple of the most important innovations that were developed in the Cannon Valley. Go ahead. Well, before we get into the innovations, these are the innovators. And the top 3 guys, the little pictures, are the Campbells. This is Grandpa Campbell here. And L.G. Campbell, and this is John. He's the one that was the last Campbell to run Malto Mill in Faribault, or Northfield. Alexander Faribault, George West, Archibald, Jesse Ames, Gardner. He's from Hastings and Cannon Falls. So these are just a few of the cast of characters that made it happen here. And you know, there were some women too. It wasn't just all men. The women, you know, took back seats to the guys that actually did the work. The women supported the men in their ventures. So, go ahead, Zach. Probably the biggest innovation in many centuries of milling was the advent of the Milling Purifier. The idea of it was started in Europe. Two French engineers that were trained in Paris at that place, Arts et Matière. I don't do French, but anyway, that's this college for engineers is still operating in Paris that the Lacroix brothers went to. The Lacroix were brought down to the Cannon Valley by Alexander Faribault and put to work building a couple mills. Well, when they were in engineer school over in Paris, that's where they were introduced to this idea of a milling purifier, which really came in handy here because the best wheat that was grown here was the most difficult to work with. I should say the type of wheat that grew best here was very difficult to work with. And this made it really simple, or much more easy, to grind better flour out of. So anyway, the Lacroix brothers were credited with the first prototype. They really didn't come up with the first idea, but they brought it to America, and it was developed right in Faribault. The crude prototype was. The reason this was so important was it created a demand for wheat that grew best in this cold climate. And the main thing it did was it helped sift out the middlings, which was the most important part of the flour, the most nutritious part, the wholesome part. And it's also sifted out the bran and the impurities. So you had a much more pure white flour, which was important. So go ahead. The new process milling actually probably came into existence before the Milling Purifier. The Archibalds down in Dundas and the Lacroix brothers in Faribault and probably Gardner in Hastings were all probably doing new process milling at the same time. And being that there was no internet then, or telephones, there wasn't a Morse code even then. They probably didn't know what each other one was doing. But they were all developing this process probably about the same time. There are some towns that want to claim that they're the first and the best and everything, but show me the proof. Anyway, the old way of milling, the old process, was stuffing as much grain as you could into the mill and just grinding it out and bagging it up. And that flour was kind of brownish colored, and it had a lot of oil in it, so it had no shelf life. And very poor flour. But anyway, with this setup here, a lot of times they'd have, in the new process milling, they would put the grain through, they'd move the stones up so it would just crack the wheat shell, just barely. And then all the produce from that would be put back in. They would drop the millstones a little bit closer together, and they would do repeated grindings, and then that's with sifting in between. And that was basically new process milling. So you were able to get a higher quality flour, and I'm not so sure about high output, but that came a little later with the roller mills. But you would definitely get more loaves per barrel of flour because the middling flour, the best flour, that was the aim of this, had more gluten in it, and it helped the loaves of bread expand more, so they're bigger. So hence you'd have more loaves of bread per barrel. And eventually you'd get more grades of flour too. So, and that was really important as technology went on. Is that pretty clear, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have a quiz now. Just kidding. You know, I'm not a mechanical person. I'm an artist, and you know, I try to keep things in the simplest terms possible, and sometimes it's easier to complicate something than it is to keep it simple. So, go ahead, Zach. The next few slides are going to be certain mills from Rice County, and the first one's in Faribault. This was a stone mill built on a bend of the Straight River in Faribault. The LaCroix brothers and a guy named Louis Carafel built the mill. LaCroix's, like I mentioned before, were the fellows that were doing work on the Milling Purifier. So I've read they said they perfected the prototype in this mill. It's a very famous site in Faribault. You drive right by it, right across the street from the sewage plant. You know, it's kind of an illustrious location. Just kidding. But anyway, you can still see the foundation there. And someday me and Bob here are going to get a bronze plaque to mark this spot. But 1866, there's really no photograph that I know of for it. So I did a drawing of it. And it's fairly accurate. It doesn't have the elevator on it, but the elevator in that case was built inside of the mill. So anyhow, they call this the shaker mill because the visiting millers that would come here couldn't quite understand why these two French millers were developing this mill that just shook all the time, so they called it the shaker mill. And it was kind of a derogatory term at the time. But the other millers had no idea what was really going on here. Okay, Zach, go ahead. Just downriver from Faribault is Dundas. If you've ever been past Dundas, you know, they got those little signs that say Dundas Milltown. Well, Dundas was a mill town. The whole town was built around the mill. The fortune of the mill depended on how, the fortune of the town depended on how well the mill was doing. And when the mill burnt, you know, the town kind of went to pot. But a lot of really important things happened here. These folks here were probably Rice County's first millionaires because they were scientific millers. You know, they really studied the craft of working with this really difficult wheat. And they embraced a lot of technology. For instance, they bought their own wheat seed from Canada, brought it down here and sowed it, and that's what they ground their flour from. They knew which wheat would work, which wheat seed would work the best here. Of course, they did the new process milling, and the first to buy the Milling Purifier, from what I understand. They were the first, they billed themselves as the first mill to have the Hungarian roller system installed. Instead of having the big heavy millstones, they had, I think it was porcelain roller setups, and very, very high quality flour and very high output. And being that they were making so much flour, they needed a lot of barrels, oak barrels. And they had a cooper shop on the across the river from the first mill, they made barrels. That's all they did. You know, a cooper shop makes barrels. A person that makes barrels is called a cooper. I don't know if anybody knew that or not. That could be the biggest lesson you'll learn tonight. The Coopers Union, well, first of all, Minnesota is known as a pretty good, what's the word? When you have it's a great state for cooperation. Co-ops are big here. And they were back in the 1860s and 70s too. The second Coopers Union in the state operated at this mill site. And they had, the union being that, you know, they had these vagabond coopers just descending upon little Dundas looking for jobs, and they got really good jobs with the union. They had a guaranteed rate of pay per barrel. They made barrels for all, they consolidated their efforts to do barrels for all the Cannon Valley mills, or a lot of them. And they supplied barrels for the Archibald Mill here too. But there's a lot written about the Dundas Coopers Union. And the reason I include that is because there's other instances in the Cannon Valley where cooperation was really important too. So it's a good, it's one of the ingredients that made it milling successful here. Go ahead. The Northfield Ames Mill, everyone's seen it. This is the old mill here. This is kind of an add-on. Same place it's been for 150 years anyway. 1855, I think it was built there. I'm not sure that's the original building, but the foundation is the same. I was lucky enough to take a tour in there, and you know, the apparatus, you know, for collecting water power, you know, the turbine and the chute for the water to fall into, has been taken out. But they don't use water power at all anymore. It's all steam or electric, one of the two. Anyhow, what was good about the Ames, Jesse Ames and his sons, is they embraced the technology that was surrounding them. Just a few miles down the road south was Archibald. Archibald were the best millers in the country at the time. So all that technology just went floating downriver, and they were benefactors of that. And they were really good businessmen. A lot of mills fell by the wayside because they couldn't keep up with technology. Same thing happens today in business. You know, the consolidation factor where, you know, little guys get pushed out. Anyway, so Ames was kind of a big deal back then, and being that they were so close to Goodhue County and the huge wheat fields, they needed a big supply of wheat and grain, so they had it. And this was, a lot of that happened before there was the rail bringing in grain from other places. So they did this, a pretty good service for the farmers in the area. So go ahead, Zach. So that's enough of Rice County for now. On to Goodhue County. That's where we're at right now. The same thing happened here that happened in Rice County. Like Faribault, Goodhue County had creeks, rivers, and a lot of fast-flowing water. One thing Goodhue County had that the other ones didn't was they had huge fields of wheat, very, very fertile land, and they did really well with the wheat farms, and they had what they call bonanza farms. Anybody ever heard of that term? Bob, you know what that means?
They're huge farms, huge wheat farms.
Okay, thank you. Bob here is the expert. I'm just a rookie. Bob is doing a book on state milling, right? All the mills in the state. Got a much bigger job than me. So Anyhow, another thing Goodhue County had that a lot of other places didn't was transportation. They had a kind of a crude road system, but all roads led to Red Wing and Hastings, from the wheat fields. And what that did was it brought all the grain into Red Wing, and you know what happened there. They became the largest wheat shipping port in the country for a period of time before the rail wrecked that. The phrase business breeds business. Has anybody heard of that? Okay, so if you got a good deal going, people making a lot of money on buying grain, the grain futures market, a lot of that happened in Red Wing. People made millions of dollars on this grain. And you notice in Red Wing, all the old downtown, it extends for blocks. And well, that didn't happen for no reason. There was a lot of money there. And the Red Wing Shoe Company came up. They have a lot of clay deposits. Red Wing pottery developed. And they actually made a lot of sewer pipes out of that clay. But anyway, Red Wing had it going on. And a lot of it started because of the milling and the grain industry. Another maybe littler known fact is anybody ever have puffed wheat? Anybody? Okay. Well, that process was developed in Red Wing by Professor Dr. Anderson Center. Anybody heard of that? Yeah. Okay. All right. And he was hired by Quaker Oats early on. So there's a lot of really good things that happen in Goodhue County. Go ahead, Zach. A few of the towns that had mills, most of them did. Country mills were scattered all over the place. There was dozens of country mills. Cannon Falls, being a river town, they had the entire start of the town was because of milling. It was the first industry that I know of. This mill here had the longest existence in Cannon Falls history. It closed in 1959, I think. That's where Art McKinley graduated from. That was his Christmas present one year. He got the pink slip saying that the mill was closing. Anyhow, Cannon Valley Mill started out as, I think, the Goodhue Mill. Up to this point, I have not used my cheat sheets, but I am going to regress and look at some of my notes here, because I think you might benefit. What Steve and Zach are doing with taking the history out of the old Fire Hall Museum and bringing it out to the people. People don't like going into places, but you get all these people, visitors coming into town, they get to see on the sides of these buildings the identity of the town. Milling is at the root of Cannon Falls, bar none. And you ever heard of towns having an identity crisis? They forget who they are, right? Cannon Falls hasn't. I heard a phrase this week, or I read a phrase. I Googled history phrases. And, there's that phrase that talks about those that forget history are condemned to repeat it. Well, the phrase I like is, see if I can remember it here. Every time history is repeated, the cost goes up. And that was by unknown. I would have took credit for that. But anyway, it wasn't my original phrase, so don't credit me. But Cannon Falls is, you got a lot of good stuff going here, and the history of milling is just one of those things that brings a lot of character and identity to the town. So go ahead, Zach. Downriver from here in Welch, it's just a pretty little town. You know, there isn't a lot going on there, but they got a lot of history. And this particular mill was set up 1870s, and they didn't have very good luck. The two owners both died within a week or two of each other. And in Zach's printouts that I gave him, there's an ad I found. They were trying to sell this mill after the unfortunate incidents that befell the previous owners. But anyway, that Welch is a pretty little town, and it's fortunate that they're right on the Cannon River. A lot of good stuff happening there, you know, with the use of the river, tubing and whatnot. And you have a question?
Yeah, in your rendering there, what are we looking at, or where are we looking?
Well,
Can you get,
oh, this could be scary. I'm just an artist, remember. This is the mill. Okay, the
really?
Oh yeah.
Damn.
Okay. Miller and Lauer rebuilt it. Okay, and
That would be on the, that's on the south side of the Cannon River then?
yeah, this building is not the feed mill that exists today, where they rent inner tubes out of. It's not the same building. I don't even think it's the same site. But the Cannon River flows here on its way to Red Wing. There was a channel cut upriver that brought water into the mill here. And when it entered this little archway, down it went. And there was no dam. There was a dam upstream, you know, to keep the water level up here. But when the water went in the arch, it would fall down and spin the turbines. Does that help you, sir? There's a fellow that just passed away. His name was Clem Nelson. He worked here. Maybe some of you knew him. Quite a guy. He sold a lot of fertilizer out of this place, apparently. I got a story started on him. Quite a character. He was the same fellow that helped develop Welch Village, the ski valley. So, okay, go ahead.
Owners died within a week or so of each other. What happened to the mill?
Went up for sale. Zach, do you have those printouts with you that I gave you?
I put them in the museum. Sorry, no, I don't.
It's only a block away. You want to run and go get them? Just kidding. 1880, I think, was when the,
Going?
there was other people that bought it. The Welch roller mill came out of it. There was other people. I don't really know what their names are, but it did operate after that. Yeah.
Pretty devastating.
Yeah, no kidding. Go ahead, Zach. Red Wing. There's a lot to be said about this town. Huge, huge grain market. Like I said before, big wheat shipping town, wheat shipping port, biggest in the country for a period of time. All roads led to Red Wing and Hastings. They were ports on the Mississippi to sell grain. Before a lot of the country mills got established, it was easier for the farmers to throw all their grain in a wagon and truck it over to Red Wing and just sell it. And they would keep some for their family, of course, for, you know, flour at home, but most of it got sold early on. And you know, if you go down to Red Wing today, you'll see this is quite a bit more developed. Looks a lot prettier now. And my wife and I sat, oh, I don't know, must have been over here. There's a couple bronze statues and a lot of benches to sit down on. Very, very pleasant day. We stayed at that big, beautiful St. James Hotel. That was built during the heyday of milling in the Cannon Valley in the 1870s. And they needed a place to entertain and to lodge, to put people up that came to town on the boats. And they needed a decent, high-quality establishment for entertaining people, and it's a great place. We stay in the Minnesota room. All the different rooms are named after riverboats. I'm not sure if anybody else knew that, but it's just a really neat place. It reeks of history. Check it out sometime. I'm getting paid to pitch that place, by the way. Anyhow, let's get out of Red Wing here, Zach. Oh, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm assuming that they used water power for the mills.
You know what? I'm not sure about that. I would say probably steam. Wouldn't you say, Bob?
I think that's right.
Yep.
Okay, so they didn't use the,
I don't think so. They may have piped some water in for steam use, for the boilers.
typically you need a differential on water. You're either feeding the top of the wheel or the bottom of the wheel, or you talked about the turbine.
Yep.
So I was wondering if they were running ductwork
Yeah.
or not. They were
I,
advanced enough they didn't have to use the rudimentary mentality?
Yeah, I really don't know, but I would say probably steam. So, coal-fired steam, wood-fired boilers. Go ahead. All right, so just to kind of wrap up this portion here, there's a lot of really, really great things that happen in the Cannon Valley. They're known all over the world for their flour. Excuse me. The barrels of flour sold for $1 more than any other flour on the New York and London stock exchanges. And I think that was in the 1870s. I'm not sure, but for a period of time, it was very, very superior flour. And that was because of the different innovations, the Milling Purifier and new process milling. And that was before the roller mills came in, which made a lot of the milling easier, higher quality, high output mills. This was all done with the millstones, that technology, the primitive technology. So other remnants of the famous past here, we got the malto mill cereals that have come out of the Cannon Valley. There are innovations galore in that company. Humphrey Manlift, anybody ever heard of that company? Yeah. Well, they're still in existence. They build elevators, man lifts, to get into the upper floors of a mill. And obviously, you didn't really need elevators when you had little country grist mills. But when you start getting these really tall 4- 5-story roller mills, where did all the fires break out? Well, they broke out all over, but a lot of them broke out way up on top where they didn't get the lubrication done properly. Maybe a little lazy, who knows? But when Humphrey Manlift sold the first elevators to, I believe it was Washburn's Mills in Minneapolis. But anyway, a lot of the Faribault mills got them too, and it reduced the threat of fire, and fire was not a good thing for mills. So, anyway, if you go on to Google, anybody heard of Google on the computer? There's Google Books, there's Google Maps, there's Google Patents. Go into Google Patents and type in Faribault Mill, Red Wing Mill, and you'll see dozens of patents. And business breeds business. And when the Cannon Valley was flourishing with all these mills and really producing some excellent quality flour, there was people flocking in from all over the place, and everyone wanted to build a better mousetrap. So there's endless patents and improvements to designs, and all the it all stimulated the economy. It all worked together. Anyway, can we go on a little bit further here? Minneapolis became the milling center of the world. I guess if you want to put a date on it, probably 1880. They were in full swing, maybe even before that. I'm not sure. It wasn't like an exact date it happened. It was more of a gradual change where the Cannon Valley mills were phased out or bought up by the bigger mills that consolidated in Minneapolis. So we see that a lot, don't we, Bob, where the smaller mills get consolidated and then their offices, instead of being in Faribault or Cannon Falls, they're in Minneapolis. That's for a reason. They had huge water power. Okay, Bob, you and I were talking about the huge underwater or underground channels for water, just like that far underneath the roads in Minneapolis. And that huge amounts of water going to all these mills from the Mississippi. They had a large labor pool. People flocked to the cities for employment. A lot of mills, a lot of work. Wasn't the best work sometimes, dirty, dangerous. That was before OSHA. People lost arms, legs. Sometimes they lost their lives. So OSHA is a good thing. Anyway, I already talked about the mill consolidation. Consolidating is still happening today. Pretty soon, I think there's going to be one company in the world, and it'll be Walmart. And you can go there and pay your energy bill. Just kidding, of course. But consolidation is a part of the development of an economy. And with that goes technology. Nowadays, when you have a problem with your cell phone and you call customer assistance, how many times do you get a person? You don't. You get some voice from India or somewhere. I don't know where they get these people. I got to be careful with that. But anyway, technology, is doing more with less. You've heard it all before. And the end result is people losing jobs and more specialized careers. So anyway, Minneapolis was able to control shipping rates with the railroad, and that helped force a lot of the smaller mills out of business because they just couldn't compete. And along the rail were huge grain storage facilities, and the bigger mills that had more resources had elevators stacked up along the rail going through the Dakotas, where all the huge wheat fields were at the time. So anyway, that's pretty much the story. They didn't really come up with a lot of the first innovations, like I talked about, the Milling Purifier and the advent of new process milling, but they were quick to use it, and they had the resources to develop it much more further. So, and they took it and ran with it, and you can still see what's left over up there. The Mill City Museum is a great place to visit. It's the most explosive museum in the world. That's what they call it. So let's go on to the next slide. Now we'll kind of dive into a little bit more about Cannon Falls, and I promise I won't get into too many details. We got about an hour left, so just kidding. One of my most favorite places in the world is Oxford Mills. Before I came here today, I was walking around in this, the ruins of this foundation here. Last time I went there, I found a fossilized duck egg that popped out of a chunk of limestone. I'm not kidding. And I brought it to my last presentation at the winery. And these people that had been drinking wine, they looked at this and was like, "Are you kidding me?" But true, you can see the shell on it and everything. Very, very old stone, by the way. So this mill here was built by Archibald and Wilcox from Dundas. Wilcox was a miller. He ground grain for the famous Archibald Brothers mill down in Dundas, and they brought all that milling success with them. They won an award at the Philadelphia Exposition in 1876. They had a bleaching process to make the flour whiter. People like white flour. So anyway, they liked it out east. So let's see, this is the first mill, and right behind here, if you go out there, you'll see a blue house, and that's the original home of Wilcox. The people are really nice, by the way, and they have good coffee. And I stopped and saw them today, and I thanked them for inviting me in all those times I did my pilgrimage down there to look at the mills here. And you know, throughout this whole process of research and whatnot for the mills, I've just been amazed at people. They must sense that this guy that's standing on their porch wanting to come in for coffee poses no danger whatsoever, you know. And this lady invited me in for coffee several times, and you know, in this day and age, you can't trust everybody. But I had pure motives. I was really, really fascinated by all this stuff. So anyway, you can go out and see the ruins anytime. I marked it off. It's probably like 30 feet by 50. And about right here, there's a wall, for some reason, that goes in. So it's like two portions. And I find it fascinating. So can we go on to the next one? Oh, okay, we have a question.
Did the top portion then burn? Or wasn't built of stone too, was it?
No, that was wood.
Yeah.
That was a limestone foundation, about that thick. And I really don't know what happened to the top.
Jeff, where is that?
It's about 2.5.
Okay, and that's the other side of the river, so we're not, thank you.
We're down to
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know
Excuse me?
what year?
1905.
Well, this one was built in 1867, and they built the new one in 1876. So this one didn't have much of a life. It could have burned. Most of them did. I really don't know. That's a great question. Okay, on to this one here. This one still exists. This is the cathedral I was telling you about. It's a holy ground for historians. There was just a bunch of preservationists out there a few weeks ago trying to figure out what to do with it, how to preserve it further. There was also a bear shot out here. Did you guys ever read that story? Wild animals. So be careful when you go out there.
Where exactly is that one?
You go about 2.5 miles west of town here on 19, and you take a left on Oxford Mill Road. Just follow that down.
So are there two mills, Oxford Mill? Or
Yeah.
that looks like a different one than the previous picture.
Well, they're different mills. This is mill number 2. This one replaced the first one. Okay. And what can I tell you about this? Oh, a friend of mine named Bob put this building on the National Register of Historic Places. And it's probably the most, I think it was probably the most intact Cannon Valley mill in existence. Is that correct, Bob? Pretty close?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And the construction of it is typical Cannon Valley mill. You got an exterior of stone quarried in the area, built over a wooden frame. The frame, wooden structure is like floating. Okay, inside there's a air pocket around it. And you can't really see it too well, but there's these star things that are about like that, placed in different spots here. And those are the end caps for these rods that would, connecting rods that would hold the walls together. So if you go out there, some of those rods are still in the wall. Kind of cool.
You probably should go soon though, because the north wall has really been crumbling in the last year.
Yep. Yeah, it's really neat to see, but you're right, it is deteriorating fast. The cool thing about this mill is it still has the channel, the race for the water coming in. The little cannon flows kind of like this way, and upstream at one time there was a dam, and just above the dam there was a channel cut into the bank and all the way around that hooked up to this. They had a gate here. They raised the gate up when they wanted to run the mill. So water would shoot underneath the road in this raceway here, and the turbine was situated in a pit on this side of the mill. You can still see all that. It's amazing. So, and you can see the holes in the limestone where the horizontal shafts, you know, help transfer the energy from the spinning turbine into the mills inside the building. This here, there was a conveyor that brought the finished flour out to the customer, and they call it a slatted conveyor, whatever that is. But anyway, it was kind of interesting. It, you know, it helps a person visualize that the wagons would pull up in front, and the workers would schlep the bags of flour or the whatever. I don't think that's big enough for a barrel to fit through. Must have been bags. Who knows? Maybe they just shoveled grain in there. I'm not quite certain. So anyway, this is an ad, the only ad I've ever seen from the Oxford Mill, and that came from Cannon Falls Historical Museum. And a lot of good stuff down there, by the way. Can we go to the next one?
Jeff, did you call that an example, the best example in the Cannon Falls area or Goodhue County?
That's the best example that's the best example of a Cannon Valley mill anywhere in the Cannon Valley.
And what was the last thing?
Anywhere in the Cannon Valley.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you can go down to Scheck's Mill down by Caledonia, and they have a mill that looks probably just a lot like this, but it's still operating. And you can take a tour for $5. Yep. So anyhow, this is one of the bigger stone mills that was built in Cannon Falls here, the little Cannon Mill. Probably the prettiest, you know, if you're into nostalgia and everything, the prettiest mill. I think the bowling alley was built here. What is here now? Anybody know? VFW. Okay. Okay. And there was a stone wall built out of this when they tore it down in 1936. That wall still exists. So anyway, the couple notable things about this mill, built in 1856, but it really didn't get used. It was built in the Depression of 1856, 57. Well, they didn't use it for anything for years except for spinning wool. And Daniels Mawson Company built it. It became the Thompson and Smith Mill. And then when it became the Plain Sifter Mill, this guy named Paul Roth Miller bought it. And the notable thing about him is he ground flour out of here, and he had contracts with all the state hospitals in Minnesota. He provided flour for Faribault State Hospital, Wilmer, Moose Lake. There's probably 6, right? 6 or 7. Anybody ever lived in one? Just kidding. Anyway, Davidson owned it too at one time, Little Cannon Mills. His name keeps popping up in Cannon Falls history. He also owned another mill that we'll be looking at here in a little bit. One thing that I find interesting in the development of these towns, mill towns especially, is a lot of the country mills were built before infrastructure was even made. Like the roads were really poor. You know, the mills could only operate part of the year because the roads were impassable. Okay, so the Civil War came around, you know, they needed flour, and guess what happened? Well, they needed roads and they needed bridges, you know, to get the flour out. So it hastened a lot of projects like bridge building, road building. A lot of the roads and bridges came about because of milling. So, we can go on to the next one. This particular guy, Stephen Gardner, he was the first millionaire in Hastings. And I don't know personally too much about him, but he built the Goodhue Mill, and his partner, Moore, Gardner and Moore, were the ones that built it. This was their letterhead over here.
He was also a banker. He had the First National Bank of Hastings and First National Bank of Cannon Falls.
Yep. Yeah. He had some money. Anyhow, Cannon Falls was lucky enough that he brought a lot of his innovations with him from Hastings, and he developed a lot of his own new process milling techniques in Hastings, simultaneous that at the same time things were happening in the Cannon Valley. But anyway, he came over here in 1872 and built this mill, and he had a lot of really interesting things that he brought here. He had a special way of making barrels. You wouldn't think that'd be that big a deal, right? But okay, when you go to all this hard work of grinding all this wheat, making the flour, putting it in barrels, well then the barrels go out and sometimes they get wet. Well, if that water seeped in to the barrel, it would discolor the flour. And sometimes whole shipments were rejected because of that. So what he did was, instead of making, you know, the boards used in the barrels were all oak at one time. Okay. Well, what he did was every other board he made out of a softer wood. So when the bands were put on the barrels and tightened down, the hardwood went into the softwood and created a more permanent seal. So when a lot of these barrels got thrown overboard, you know, to put on the ocean-going vessels, they didn't leak at all. So that was one of his deals. And another thing he was known for is using magnets to get wire and stuff out of the grain that came in. I've heard other accounts of other millers doing that too, but anyway, he did a lot of really good things. And he was the fellow that had the King Midas mill in Hastings on the Vermilion, that humongous mill that's still there operating. He was the one that started it. So, and I do believe Graham flour was invented at that mill. One of his millers was called Graham. So anyway, let's go on to the next slide here. Getting a little long. Another Goodhue slide. Most of you are probably raised on Vanity Fair flour if you lived here in Cannon Falls. Anybody eat Vanity Fair flour? Cakes? Anything? Your mother's ever doing cooking at home? Okay. Well, a lot of the salesmen from these mills went around to all the ice cream socials in the summertime because they were done by, you know, churches had these socials. Well, that's where they would go to sell flour. You know, they go to the different ice cream socials. There's a fellow named Doug Johnson that was from this town that told me that story. So anyhow, you'll see that this says Mills at Cannon Falls, but the offices are in Minneapolis. It says that somewhere here. So that was after the consolidation. So, you know, this was the Gardner Moore Mill and then Vanity Fair Mill, and another name was the Cannon Valley Milling Company. It's the longest lived mill in town. Go ahead. Otto Dobler was a big name here. He came by way of Hastings and Gardner Mills, and he learned all the tricks that Gardner had to offer, and to make decent flour, and he was very, very well liked. He was a good businessman and just a fine person, and he made good flour. So this was one of the ads that I found when I was up with Bob at the Minnesota Historical Society, you know, paging through all the reference files up there for milling. And I had the opportunity to track down this fellow's great-grandson, Doc Dobler. He is a doctor. And this particular doctor told me he was the first doctor in Minnesota to install a stent in a heart. You know, which is pretty cool. But it was his great-grandpa that made this flour that probably led to a lot of the heart problems that people are having today. So I kind of like irony. So anyhow, Doc Dobler owns the big golf course up called Mississippi Dunes. If there's any golfers here. Let's go to the next one here. R.C. Knox Mill. This was built by none other than George West. This is his diary, 1858 diary. And this guy was famous. He did work all over the Cannon Valley. He was a millwright. He built mills. He repaired mills. Not too long after this mill was built, it flooded out or burned down, one of the two, I can't remember. And this lady came out of nowhere. Her name was Cornelia Grosvenor. Anybody ever heard that name? Grosvenor? Well, if you Google Grosvenor, you'll find out that it's associated with National Geographic for 4 generations. They started National Geographic. Yep, it's true. You can quote me on that. So she had enough money to rebuild the entire mill. And E.W., I think was her uncle, I'm not sure. I tracked down one of the remaining survivors of the family to get more information. The lady that transcribed this from George West's diary was related to the Grosvenors. So anyhow, so this mill went by a lot of different names. The Phoenix Roller Mill was aptly named. It rose out of the ashes literally, you know, from this mill that burned down. Let's go to the next one, please. Phoenix Roller Mill is widely known as the Davidson Mill, and it was water powered. As you see, it's, you know, it's got the dam and the whole rig. You know, it didn't have any steam power. There's no boiler plant or anything. They had a beautiful letterhead too. Being an artist, I really enjoy the Victorian letterheads. Just beautiful. And this is the crew that posed for the picture that one day. A little bit of attitude here. And of course, this is the guy with the money. He doesn't have white clothes on. He probably didn't get his hands dirty. But the rest of them are workers. Anyhow, you can't really see it, but this is our Gregg Milling Company here. I suppose that leftover sacks, and the Davidson Phoenix Roller Mill decided, well, you know, why buy new bags when you can use the old one? Can we go to the next one? Okay. This is the biggest water power in town, and it never ground 1 barrel of flour. How come?
Electricity.
It makes a lot of electricity. And does anybody know the tie to Thomas Edison? The Cannon Falls connection to Thomas Edison? I can't believe it. I thought we had some professionals here. Well, Billsby himself was a student of Thomas Edison. Yep, I've done my research. It's pretty cool. You go out there and you go out to this place here and you can just see the outcropping of limestone. There was like this big gorge. And so they backed up the water. They've been producing electricity for years out there, 100-some years. It's a long time anyhow. And of course, you know, with all the milling and technology development and harnessing water power, there is a downside to it. When they backed up the river, it flooded out a major Indian village site. So if you go scuba diving back far enough, you'll find pots and arrowheads and other, you might even find some burials, who knows. But you know, nothing stands in the way of progress, right? Anyhow, I thought that was pretty important to add in there, even though they really didn't grind flour, but they've done a huge service to the area by providing clean electricity. And you would think in this day and age that water power generating electricity would become more popular, less of a carbon footprint, you know, cleaner production. So anyway, let's go on to the next one here. This is the George West Diary. It's much bigger than the original. Zach showed me the original, and it's this big. Is that right, Zach? Yeah. And I had to take my glasses off to read it. But the lady that transcribed it, that painstakingly went through every page, she saw that he recorded, well, there's all kinds of information in here about George West. He came here in 1856, 1857, pioneer in every sense of the word. A millwright. He was a machinist. He owned a company down in Ohio. He was part of a foundry. So he knew how to work with metals, and he knew how to design systems, mill systems. So anyway, all that's outlined in here. Most fascinating thing as a person that enjoys looking at minutia, like me, is you can go through this page after page, and you can see entries for money he took in and money that went out. For mill supplies he ordered for different mills. He, down by Faribault, where I'm from, is Kansas City, and he built a mill there. He built a grist mill for these people called Starks and Sears, and it's all outlined in here. You know, $260 for millstones, that's one set. Imported millstones, belting, shafts, you name it, it's all in here. And I mean, what a great portal to the past. This is a treasure, Zach. There's a lot of others too at that museum. This is just one of them. West here managed to hold on in Cannon Falls for 17 years after he built the R.C. Knox Mill, the Cannon Falls City Mill. He became manager for 17 years. I think he was related to the Grosvenor family. They had all the money. So, and if you know what the golden rule is, right? If you have the gold, you rule. And he was related to the people that had the money. So anyhow, it wasn't too hard to figure out how he kept his job. He must have been good at it too. He did a really interesting trip before the state became recognized as a state, 1857. He and a party of a few others left Cannon Falls, and they went all the way down into Missouri, all the way to Nebraska, and they crossed the Missouri River, back around through Dakota Territory, looking for land, quarter sections to buy. It's all outlined in here. You know, they started out in Cannon Falls, went to Faribault, through Cannon Lake. They talk about getting stuck in a swamp and having to unload the entire wagon and push it out. Could you imagine? Anyhow, and then 3 months later they came back, and August 23rd, they came back to Cannon Falls. And you know, they give details of the trip. And I don't know about you, but sleeping under a wagon doesn't sound like my cup of tea. You know, and every now and then, you know, if a deluge of rain would come down, they'd duck into an Indian teepee. That's in here too. Kind of cool. Gives you a real good idea of how hard life was. The entries for the The millwright business for working on the mills abruptly ended in 1859. Can anybody tell me why that might have happened? Why did his business cease? Well, he did all this work for the Kansas City Mill, and something happened where Starks and Sears took him to court. And so I did a little digging, and I found information, court documents online. The fact that he did get in trouble, and he must not have built to the right specs or one thing or another. But in here it talks about him looking for witnesses to stand up for him in court. Kind of interesting. That was the last entry in 1859. But from there, it talks a lot about when he became a family man and the things that he bought. Silk, cotton, needles, baby shoes, bugle trimming. And you know, that's just the start of it. And then it talks about his grocery runs. You know, he got the grocery grabber out and went to a store and filled up the wagon. And in 1857, in the height of the Depression, where do you suppose he's getting mackerel from? In Cannon Falls. That's a long ways from the ocean, right? And I'm sure it wasn't cheap. You know, it just sets a mind to thinking. You start asking questions like, he must have been living pretty good. He took care of his family. He made a good living. So I urge you to take some time and read the diary of George West. You learn a lot about Cannon Falls here. Zach showed me he's got probably 5 or 6 others in a box that contains this one. And if any of you are looking for a volunteer job, I'm sure you could transcribe any one of those diaries. Right, Steve? Or Zach?
There's a lot of fun transcribing work to be done.
Yeah. Our friend Emily here is kind of doing the same thing with some letters from General Shields.
The diaries from his.
Okay, from the Minnesota Historical Society. So, go ahead.
You know where George West is buried?
I guess you do?
No.
Couldn't tell you. Any other questions?
Presentation, I'll check on the computer.
Am I right that his house is where John Anderson is now?
Anderson Insurance.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah, his house.
Thanks.
Oh, hi, John.
Well, you've been a great audience, and thanks for making it so easy for me by not falling asleep or anything, laughing at my bad jokes.
About the Oxford Mill, I was told or heard or read that all the records had burnt with the mill. Do you know if that's a fact? Or?
It wouldn't surprise me. Wouldn't surprise me.
I have a question. When you first approached looking at that mill, the people that live across the road that own it, did they say you were trespassing? Did you have a problem with that?
Trespassing.
Because my friend took their family out there to photograph.
Oh, yeah.
And the person came out and said, you're trespassing, you need
Yeah.
to leave.
They make it pretty apparent they don't want anybody. There's,
That's why I
honestly,
wondered
there's
if you
8 or
read
9 no
that.
trespassing signs, at least.
Well, then how were you able to do that?
Well, I've been doing pilgrimages down there for 8 years. And
So you were kind of grandfathered in then, huh?
I think so. Or I got lucky. But yeah, it's not real safe walking around that place. Those big stones could fall anytime. So,
But you have public access from the road, which is very close.
any other
They
questions?
would want to keep it safe.
Okay,
Thanks, Jeff.
can we close with the Lord's Prayer, then?